Imagine stepping into the echoing silence of the Roman catacombs, only to hear a faint, chilling whisper in the darkness. What if the dead aren't truly resting, and their ancient secrets are finally breaking through the stone? Join me as we delve into these depths, where history's most haunting tales refuse to stay buried. Rome, a city of light, sound, and life above ground, and a city of silence beneath. Under the cobblestone streets, where tourists snap photos and espresso fills the air, lies a network of tunnels stretching for miles, a labyrinth of stone carved nearly 2,000 years ago. The Roman catacombs, burial grounds for saints, slaves, and sinners alike. A place where faith met fear. When I first descended those steps, I thought I was prepared. I'd read the history, early Christians buried here to avoid persecution, entire families sealed in limestone alcoves, inscriptions etched into the walls begging for eternal peace. But the moment my flashlight flickered across those endless corridors of skulls, a heaviness pressed against my chest. The air was thick, not with dust but with something older. It began as an investigation, a curiosity born from whispers that had spread through Rome's underground research community. Over the past year, several archaeologists and local guides had reported hearing faint voices while working in the catacombs. Not echoes, not hallucinations, actual whispers, indistinct like someone murmuring prayers just out of reach. Most dismissed it. Old tunnels make strange sounds, air currents slip through cracks and create illusions of voices. But then came a video, uploaded anonymously, a blurry clip from a phone camera showing a dim corridor deep within the catacombs of Calixtus. At first, only footsteps and dripping water could be heard. Then faintly a voice whispered, "Nania Solis." You are not alone. I couldn't let it go. Maybe it was staged, maybe not. But I needed to know. The descent was colder than I expected. My guide, a man named Lorenzo, had worked the catacomb tours for 15 years. His flashlight beam trembled slightly as he walked, his steps careful on the damp stone floor. We close these tunnels at sunset, he said quietly. After dark, no one stays. Not even the priests. Because of the whispers? I asked, half joking. He didn't answer. We moved through narrow halls lined with ancient burial niches, thousands of them stacked like drawers of forgotten souls. Some still bore faint inscriptions, names, prayers, fragments of hope. I brushed the edge of one carving with my gloved hand. The stone felt warm. Lorenzo stopped suddenly. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. I froze. At first, there was nothing, just our breathing and the quiet drip of water. Then, soft as breath through a reed, came a sound. Faint, elongated, a whisper. It wasn't Latin. It wasn't any word I recognized. It slithered along the walls, echoing in ways that made it impossible to tell direction. Lorenzo turned pale. That's enough for today, he muttered. We should go. But I didn't move. I leaned closer toward the sound, my recorder light blinking red. The whisper came again, shorter this time. Almost curious, like it had noticed us. We left, but something followed us out. I couldn't explain it, the way the air seemed to hum, or how my own heartbeat felt a fraction out of sync with the world. That night I played back the recording. For a long time, there was nothing but static and the faint sound of footsteps. Then a breath. Not mine. Not Lorenzo's. And then faintly it spoke, "Lucius." I stopped the playback. Rewound. Played it again. The same. The name Lucius, whispered in a low, hollow tone that seemed to come from inside the stone itself. I don't know why, but that name chilled me. Maybe because I'd heard it before, carved into one of the walls we passed, half eroded by time. I hadn't said it aloud. I hadn't even thought it clearly. The next day I returned alone. The tour office was closed. I'd told Lorenzo I'd left the city. But curiosity burns louder than fear. I slipped past the iron gate near the Appian Way, carrying a small flashlight, an audio recorder, and a notebook. The tunnel swallowed sound almost immediately. The deeper I went, the more wrong it felt. The walls seemed to tighten around me, pressing in closer than before. My light reflected off bone, pale, eyeless sockets staring back. Somewhere in the distance, water dripped rhythmically, echoing like a heartbeat. Half an hour passed. I stopped near a fork in the tunnel, where faint symbols marked the wall. Circular carvings, crosses intertwined with spirals. They weren't Christian. Not entirely. Some predated Christ, etched by hands that believed in older gods. Then it came again. The whisper. Only this time it wasn't distant. It was behind me. I spun around, beam slicing through the dark. Nothing. Just dust motes floating in the cone of light. Then another voice, softer, almost pleading. A woman's tone trembling. Non-audious, do not listen. I should have left. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to climb back toward the light. But something inside me, something between fascination and madness, kept me rooted to the spot. I turned on my recorder again. Who are you? I whispered. What do you want? For a moment, nothing. Then the temperature dropped, a sudden biting cold that made my breath visible. The flashlight flickered once, twice. And then, return what was taken. I froze. My heart pounded so hard it echoed off the stone. What do you mean? I whispered, my voice shaking. But the air had gone still. I played the recording back on the spot. The voice was there, faint but clear. Return what was taken. But there was something else too. Underneath the voice. A sound that hadn't been there when I was recording. A slow scraping noise. Like fingers dragging along the wall, right next to me. I lifted my light, and the beam caught something on the stone. A single fresh handprint, smeared in dust. Small, human, and warm. My breath hitched. I stepped back, trembling, and the whisper came one last time, now echoing from everywhere, overlapping voices, hundreds of them, rising and fading, impossible to separate. Then silence. And in that silence, my own name whispered right into my ear. I ran. When I finally reached the surface, the city's sunlight felt wrong, too bright, too loud. I checked the recording again. The whispers were there. All of them. But when I looked at the timestamp, my blood ran cold. The recording was over 2 hours long. But I had only been down there for 30 minutes. Something down there knew my name before I ever said it. And I think it's waiting for me to come back. The next morning, Rome felt different. The streets were alive as always, vendors shouting, bells ringing, tourists flowing like a river of color. But to me, everything sounded muted. Every echo, every passing murmur carried an undertone that made my skin crawl. It wasn't paranoia. It was awareness. Once you've heard the dead whisper your name, silence becomes your enemy. I hadn't slept. The recorder lay on my hotel desk, its small red light still blinking like it had more to say. I played the file again, headphones tight against my ears. The first whispers still came faintly, then that name, Lucius, then the phrase return what was taken. But there was something new this time. A subtle background noise I hadn't noticed before. A faint hum, rhythmic and uneven. Not human. Not electrical either. It sounded like chanting. I froze the playback at the exact timestamp and isolated the audio. The pattern repeated every 16 seconds. 4 low tones followed by a short pause. Not random. Almost like a code. At first, I thought it might have been interference. Subway lines, equipment, anything rational. But the tunnels where I recorded had no modern wiring. No power lines. Nothing but stone, bone, and darkness. I needed answers. That afternoon, I met with Professor Giulio Verena, an expert in Roman archaeology at Sapienza University. I told him I was researching the catacombs for a documentary and played him a portion of the recording. He listened in silence, his eyes narrowing. Where did you get this? From the catacombs of Calixtus, I said carefully. He leaned back, folding his hands. You should not have gone there alone. Those tunnels were never just burial chambers. They were layers, built over older foundations. Older? Pre-Christian. Pagan sanctuaries. Some were used by mystery cults, the followers of Mithras, of Hecate. There are records of rites involving sacrifices and chants performed underground, where they believed the earth could hear them. He glanced at the recorder again. This pattern you hear, it resembles a Morse rhythmus, a death rhythm. Romans believed repeating tones like these could summon the spirits of the unburied. I frowned. Summon them? For what? For confession, he said softly. Or revenge. The professor's tone unsettled me, but what chilled me most was when he asked, You said it whispered the name Lucius? I nodded. He exhaled slowly. Then you've touched something very old. There was a priest named Lucius Varius Rufinus, executed in 257 AD for performing forbidden rites beneath the city. His tomb was lost when the tunnels collapsed. Legend says he defied both gods and emperors to speak to the dead, and the dead answered. The room felt colder suddenly, though sunlight still poured through the window. Before I left, Professor Verena handed me a small piece of parchment from his archives, an ancient record copied from an inscription found deep in the catacombs centuries ago. The Latin was faded, but he translated it aloud. Those who call upon the sleepers will awaken what was buried in silence. The earth remembers. That night, I visited a small cafe near Via Appia. One of the waiters, an older man named Paolo, overheard me asking about the catacombs. He hesitated before sitting across from me. "You're not the first to hear the whispers," he said quietly. "My cousin was a guard there years ago. He lasted 2 nights. What happened to him?" Paolo looked down. He said the tunnels changed. He walked the same corridor 3 times and it was never the same. He heard someone calling his name from behind a sealed wall. Then he saw shadows, moving between the bones. When he came out, his hair was white. He never went back. I tried to press him for more, but Paolo only shook his head. There are things buried in those tunnels that were never meant to be disturbed. Some say the whispers are not ghosts, but memories, living memories that echo until they find someone to carry them. I thanked him and left, but his words followed me through the night. Memories that needed someone to carry them. The next morning, I received an email with no sender address. Attached was a short video, grainy footage from a body camera, timestamped 3 months earlier. The file name was scaviroma_03.mp4. The camera moved through the catacombs, flickering light illuminating narrow passages. At one point, the explorer stopped near a cracked alcove, brushing away dust to reveal an inscription, Lucius Varius Rufinus. My heart pounded. The same name. Then came the whisper. The same tone. The same voice from my recording. But this time it said something new, 3 words, clear and urgent. He still listens. The footage ended abruptly with the sound of running footsteps and a crash. I sat there frozen. Whoever sent that video knew exactly what I had heard. I decided to test something. I returned to the catacombs entrance that night, not to go inside, but to set up an external microphone. I wanted to know if the whispers could be heard even from the surface. I left the recorder on for 1 hour, standing in the silent field nearby. Nothing unusual happened, until I checked the playback. At the 40-minute mark, faint voices bled through the static again. But they weren't speaking Latin this time. They were speaking Italian, and they were whispering my words. Every sentence I'd spoken during my first visit, repeated perfectly, one after another. Not echoes. I had been recorded back. By now, sleep was impossible. The sounds had followed me into my dreams. I heard muffled whispers through the hotel's air vents, through the hum of the refrigerator, even in the static of the television. I started seeing faint marks on my hands, thin gray dust that wouldn't wash off. I went back to Professor Verena, desperate for clarity. He looked troubled when I told him about the Italian whispers. "You said they repeated your words?" "Yes." "Then you've become part of the loop. These tunnels, they absorb sound, time, memory. They keep everything that enters them. The Romans believed that once you spoke in those chambers, your voice belonged to the earth." He hesitated before continuing. "Whatever is whispering to you, it may not be trying to scare you. It may be trying to speak through you." I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was stacking higher than reason. When I returned to my room that night, my recorder had turned itself on. It was playing back a new file, time-stamped only minutes before I walked in. There was no introduction, no background noise. Just a voice. Calm. Familiar. My own. Repeating the words, "He still listens." The same phrase from the video. I stared at the recorder and for a moment I couldn't breathe. My reflection in the window looked distorted, like the light was bending. Then I realized something. Behind me, in the reflection, the outline of another figure stood near the doorway. I turned around instantly. The room was empty. Only the whisper remained. A low, drawn-out breath from the shadows, curling through the air like smoke. "Lucius." I stumbled backward, knocking the chair over. The sound didn't fade this time. It followed me into the hall, down the stairs, into the street. I left the hotel that night and didn't return. But the next morning, when I checked the recorder one last time, the final seconds of the audio froze my blood. After the last whisper, there was a faint scraping sound again. And then, quietly, too close to the microphone to be distant, came 3 words I hadn't heard before. "Beneath the altar." Whatever this was, it wasn't random. The whispers were leading me somewhere. Somewhere only Lucius would know. and I was starting to think they didn't want me to leave Rome at all. The words wouldn't leave my mind. Beneath the altar. They looped endlessly, whispering in the silence between my thoughts. I tried to drown them out with noise, traffic, music, conversation, but nothing worked. It was as if the catacombs had embedded themselves inside me. Every sound I heard felt slightly off, warped by something ancient pressing against the edges of my reality. I spent 2 days combing through old maps of Rome's underground systems. Most were incomplete. The catacombs stretched for hundreds of miles, many passages unmapped or sealed centuries ago. Yet one detail caught my attention. Beneath the Basilica of San Sebastiano, the same site where the catacombs of Calixtus connect, there was a subchamber noted on an 18th century excavation diagram. It was labeled simply Altar Vetus, the old altar. Beneath the altar. I knew I shouldn't go back, but the pull was irresistible. Something wanted to be found. The night I returned, the city above was silent. I entered through a maintenance shaft hidden behind an ivy-covered wall along the Appian Way. My flashlight cut a weak line through the dust. The tunnels greeted me like a mouth swallowing light. Every sound mattered down there. My breath. My steps. The soft grind of gravel under my boots. I followed the main corridor until I reached a narrow passage blocked by fallen stone. My heart pounded as I began to dig through it, slowly, carefully. Each movement echoed like a heartbeat against the ancient walls. When the opening was wide enough, I crawled through. The air beyond was colder, thick with the scent of damp earth and old incense. My flashlight flickered, throwing trembling shadows across the walls. Symbols were etched everywhere: circles, crescent moons, coiling serpents. This wasn't Christian burial ground anymore. It was older. At the center of the chamber stood a cracked stone altar, dark stains marking its surface. Beneath it, the floor was uneven, as if something had once been buried there and later disturbed. I lifted the recorder, pressing record. I stopped. My voice sounded wrong, slightly delayed, as if the air was repeating me before I finished speaking. This is the subchamber beneath San Sebastiano, I continued carefully. Markings indicate pagan ritual use. There's an altar here. Possible signs of excavation. Then I heard it. A breath. Right beside me. I swung the flashlight, heart hammering, but there was no one there. Just the altar and the carvings. The whisper came again, longer this time, almost melodic. Red quetzalblatum est. The same phrase from before. Return what was taken. My hands trembled as I replayed the translation in my mind. I crouched near the altar, brushing away centuries of dust. The stone beneath bore faint chisel marks. Someone had pried something loose. Using a small trowel, I scraped at the gap. The edge gave way easily, and inside the hollow I found something small wrapped in decayed fabric. A pendant of dark bronze, shaped like an eye within a circle. Around its edges were the same spiral symbols etched into the walls. The moment I touched it, the air changed. A deep vibration filled the chamber, low, resonant, almost alive. My flashlight dimmed to a faint pulse of light, and the whispers rose again. Not one voice this time, but hundreds, overlapping, pleading, commanding. Red quetzalblatum est. Return what was taken. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the uneven floor. The pendant burned cold in my palm, so cold it hurt. Then, for a fraction of a second, the light steadied, and I saw them. Figures. Pale and thin, half-transparent, emerging from the walls. Faces frozen in silent screams, hands reaching from the stone like drowning victims clawing at water. Their mouths moved in perfect unison with the chant. Then a single voice cut through the chaos. Come. You should not have come back. I dropped the pendant. It hit the ground with a sharp clang that echoed forever. The figures vanished, and the silence that followed was suffocating. I turned and ran. When I finally reached the surface, I collapsed in the grass, gasping. My skin felt numb. My hands were covered in the same gray dust I'd seen before, but this time faint marks had appeared on my forearm, lines shaped like letters. I scrubbed at them, but they didn't fade. That night, I tried to rationalize it. Hallucination. Lack of oxygen. Stress. My mind inventing patterns from fear. But when I checked the recording, my rational world crumbled again. At first, it was static. Then came the whispers. Louder this time, clearer, almost organized. In the middle of them, I heard something impossible, my own voice speaking words I never said. The seal is broken. I replayed it a dozen times. My tone, my inflection, exactly mine. But I had never spoken those words. I went back to Professor Verena the next morning, desperate. He looked at the marks on my arm and went pale. "These symbols," he said, tracing them gently with his finger, "are part of the Rituale Silentiae, a rite used to contain spirits within the earth. Whoever performed it wanted to silence the dead, and now you've undone it." He showed me an old manuscript from his archives, depicting the same eye symbol I'd found on the pendant. This belonged to the Vigilants, a sect of priests who believed that the spirits of Rome's dead were still conscious beneath the city. They offered sacrifices to keep them asleep. "The pendant you touched may have been their seal. So I released them?" I asked. He hesitated. "Or woke them." That night, I stayed in a new hotel across town, far from the catacombs. I locked the door, left the lights on, and tried to write down everything that had happened. But the whispers didn't stop. They had changed, no longer random, no longer faint. They spoke directly now, slipping between the sounds of my breath. "Lucius failed us. You opened the gate. The altar is not the end." I covered my ears, but their voices were inside my head now, vibrating in my bones. My reflection in the mirror flickered like bad static. For a moment I saw someone else, my face but older, pale, wearing Roman robes. And when I blinked, it was gone. Sleep finally took me in short bursts. I dreamed of corridors that bled into each other endlessly, of an altar dripping with black water, and a voice whispering from beneath the stone, "We are awake." I woke up at dawn, the window fogged from the inside. My notebook lay open on the desk, covered in words I didn't remember writing, lines of Latin scrawled in trembling handwriting. The same phrase repeated over and over. "Sub altar sanguis clamat." Beneath the altar, the blood calls. By morning, I knew what I had to do. The whispers weren't leading me to the altar, they were leading me below it. Deeper than the catacombs anyone had mapped. Whatever was buried down there wasn't just the past. It was something still alive in the dark. And now it knew me by name. By the fourth night, I'd stopped pretending I could leave Rome. The whispers made sure of that. Every time I packed my bag, the recorder clicked on by itself. Every time I tried to sleep, my dreams replayed the same voice, low, measured, and patient. "You have seen the altar. Now go below." I had to finish it. Not for glory, not for curiosity, just to end it. I gathered what I could. 2 flashlights, spare batteries, rope, chalk for marking the walls, and the recorder that had become my unwanted companion. Then I returned to the Appian Way, where the earth waited like a mouth I'd been warned never to enter again. The descent was slower this time. I moved alone through the tunnels, whispering to myself to stay calm. The catacombs seemed changed, as if they were breathing. The air pulsed faintly and the walls felt warmer, almost organic. Each step echoed with unnatural precision, like someone, or something, was matching my rhythm from deeper inside. When I reached the chamber of the altar again, everything was exactly as I'd left it, except for one thing. The pendant I dropped was gone. A single streak of fresh dust trailed from the altar toward a fissure in the wall. I crouched, shining my light into the gap. The beam vanished into darkness beyond. The passage had been hidden, sealed by centuries of collapse. But now it gaped open as if something had pushed from the other side. I hesitated. Then, tightening my grip on the flashlight, I crawled through. The air shifted instantly, thicker, colder. My breath fogged in front of me. The tunnel narrowed until I had to slide sideways to move, my shoulders scraping the stone. My heart pounded so loud it drowned out the world. I felt like I was being swallowed by time itself. After several minutes, the passage opened into a vast, circular chamber. My light struggled to reach the edges, but what it revealed was enough to stop my heart. Rows of statues lined the walls, figures in flowing Roman robes, their faces carved in terror. Their eyes had been gouged out, and each statue held something in its hands, human skulls, their surfaces etched with writing. In the center of the room stood a second altar, smaller, blacker, pulsing faintly with moisture that dripped into a shallow basin below. And there, carved into the stone floor in a spiraling pattern, were words. "In tenebris non est oblivio." In darkness there is no forgetting. The recorder in my pocket began to hum. Then, out of nowhere, the light flickered, and the whispers returned. At first they were faint, like a chorus warming its voice. Then they grew, hundreds of them, overlapping in rising cadence until the air itself vibrated. My flashlight dimmed again, flickering to the rhythm of the voices. I clamped my hands over my ears, but the whispers weren't in the air, they were inside my skull. Lucius, Lucius, Lucius. The name repeated, relentless. Then the tone shifted. He opened the door. He must seal it again. Blood for silence. I fell to my knees, gasping. What do you want from me? The chamber went still. Then one voice, clear, resonant, too close to be disembodied, spoke from behind me. Lucius Varius Rufinus. I turned. A man stood at the edge of the altar's light, tall, thin, dressed in tattered remnants of Roman robes, his skin gray as dust, his eyes hollow voids. His lips didn't move, yet I heard his voice perfectly inside my head. You woke what I bound, he said. You carry my mark. I stumbled backward. Lucius. He stepped closer, his form flickering like smoke. I tried to keep them silent. I sealed their hunger beneath stone. But you touched the seal. You called them back. His gaze shifted toward the black altar. Now they will not sleep again unless one of us remains. The walls began to tremble. Dust rained from the ceiling. Beneath the altar, the ground cracked, revealing something moving, slow, massive, breathing. A faint red glow seeped through the fissures, accompanied by a sound like grinding teeth. Return what was taken, Lucius whispered. I didn't understand. Then I saw the pendant. It lay on the altar, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. I reached for it, but as soon as my fingers touched the metal, pain exploded through me. Visions flooded my mind, ancient Rome burning, priests chanting beneath the earth, men and women bound in chains, their mouths sewn shut as the walls closed around them. I felt their terror, their agony, their desperate prayers to gods who never answered. Then one by one their voices turned toward me. Free us. Feed us. Join us. I dropped the pendant, screaming. The light died completely. In the pitch black, movement surrounded me. Footsteps. Hands brushing the stone. Faces pressing from the darkness. Too close, too real. I scrambled backward, the recorder clutched in one hand. Its red light flickered wildly as the whispers swelled into a deafening roar. Then silence. I felt a hand on my shoulder. Cold. Steady. Lucius's voice whispered beside my ear. If you wish to live, seal it as I did. With blood. Before I could react, something erupted from beneath the altar. A mass of writhing forms, human and not, dragging themselves upward through the fissure. Their skin glowed faintly red, eyes hollow, mouths wide and silent. The air filled with the stench of decay and iron. I turned and ran. My flashlight flickered once, twice, then died completely. I ran blind through the tunnels, slamming into walls, following the faint sound of my own heartbeat. Behind me the whispers followed, growing distorted, furious. Seal it, seal it, seal it. At one point I fell, skinning my hands on jagged rock. The pendant rolled past me, landing against the wall. I grabbed it instinctively, and the voices stopped. The silence was so sudden it felt physical. I crawled toward a narrow shaft, the faint draft of surface air hitting my face. I didn't look back. I couldn't. By the time I emerged onto the Appian Way, the sun was rising. My hands were shaking, my clothes torn, and the pendant was gone again. My recorder was still running. I played it back right there in the grass, trembling. At first static. Then Lucius's voice, the altar sleeps again. And underneath it, faint, distant, almost sighing, came a new whisper. Not for long. I went back to the university that afternoon, but Professor Verena's office was empty. The door was locked. When I asked the clerk, she looked confused. Professor who? She asked. There's no one here by that name. I checked the university archives. Nothing. No record of Giulio Verena. No papers, no publications. It was as if he'd never existed. That night, I noticed the dust had returned to my hands. The gray film spread across my skin like ash. When I looked closer, I saw faint shapes forming beneath it. Tiny faces, mouths open, whispering silently. The whispers weren't gone. They had simply moved closer. I thought sealing the altar had ended it, but now I understand what Lucius meant. The catacombs don't just exist beneath Rome. They exist beneath everything. The voices don't fade, they travel. They follow sound, memory, and blood. And now they have all three. I can still hear them when I close my eyes, faint, patient, waiting. And sometimes between their whispers I hear something else. My own voice whispering back. I left Rome before dawn. The air still carried the damp scent of earth and something older, something that clung to me like invisible ash. My hands trembled on the steering wheel as I drove toward the airport, glancing into the rearview mirror every few seconds, expecting to see something that shouldn't be there. But the road stayed empty. The city behind me grew smaller, swallowed by a pale morning haze. For a moment, I dared to believe I'd escaped. The first whisper came somewhere over the Mediterranean. I was half asleep when I heard it, a soft breath against the airplane window, as though someone on the other side of the glass had spoken my name. I sat upright, heart hammering, scanning the cabin. Everyone was asleep. The engines droned steadily. The world looked ordinary. But when I pressed my hand to the window, the glass was cold. And beneath that coldness, faintly etched into the condensation, were words. In tenebris non est oblivio. My blood turned to ice. When I landed back home, the sky was gray and heavy with rain. I told myself it was just exhaustion, a trick of the mind. But even as I unlocked the door to my apartment, the silence felt wrong, too dense, like the air itself was listening. The recorder was still in my bag. I didn't remember packing it, but there it was, its light blinking weakly. When I pressed play, I expected static. Instead, a voice, my own voice, spoke softly through the speaker. It followed me. The recording ended with a low, hollow sound that made my stomach twist. It wasn't the catacombs, not anymore. It was closer. I shut the recorder off and threw it into a drawer. That night, the dreams returned. I saw the chamber again, the statues, the altar, the faces carved into stone. Only this time, the statues were gone, replaced by people I recognized. My neighbors, my family, myself. Each of us whispering the same phrase over and over, until our mouths began to bleed. When I woke, there was a faint humming under the floor, like air moving through narrow passages. I pressed my ear to the ground. The sound wasn't random, it was rhythmic, like breathing, like something alive. Over the next few days, things escalated. My apartment lights flickered in perfect sync with the heartbeat I felt through the floor. Shadows stretched where they shouldn't. And at night, whispers crawled through the air vents, soft, conversational, almost human. Sometimes they laughed. I tried recording them again, hoping for proof, for clarity, for something. But every playback was the same, a voice whispering my name, followed by the sound of digging. I called the Historical Society in Rome, desperate for contact. When I mentioned the catacombs, the line went silent. Then a woman's voice said, "You shouldn't have gone there," and hung up. I started to question my own sanity. But madness doesn't leave footprints. And I swear I saw them, dusty, barefoot prints across my kitchen floor one morning, leading to the window. The same gray dust from the catacombs. I cleaned them. 10 minutes later, they were back. By the 5th day, I couldn't stay inside anymore. The air had grown heavy, oppressive. I left the apartment and checked into a small motel near the outskirts of the city, telling myself distance would help. It didn't. That night, the power went out. My phone died. The shadows stretched again, long and deliberate. I could hear the whispering through the walls, muffled but growing clearer, as though they were learning my language. Then came the knock on the door. 3 sharp raps. Then silence. I held my breath. The knock came again, followed by a whisper just outside the door. "Lucius." I froze. That name. Again. Slowly I approached the peephole. No one was there. Just an empty corridor. But when I looked down, I saw it. An envelope, yellowed with age, resting on the floor. My name was written across it in the same ancient script I'd seen carved into the catacomb walls. Inside was a single photograph. It showed the altar exactly as I'd left it, except someone else was standing beside it. Someone holding my flashlight. Someone who looked exactly like me. The next day I received an email. No sender, no subject, just an attachment. Against my better judgment, I opened it. It was an audio file. The first sound was static. Then my own voice whispered, "He's behind you." I turned. No one. But the air had gone cold again, the kind of cold that makes breath visible even indoors. I could smell the catacombs, wet stone, old bones, the faint trace of dust. And then I realized something. The whisper wasn't echoing anymore. It was coming from inside the recorder drawer. I opened it slowly. The recorder was on, its light blinking faster than before. A voice crackled through the speaker, distorted, ancient, but unmistakably mine. "The altar is open. They're awake." The light went out. From the corner of the room, the wall cracked softly, Just a hairline fracture, but enough for gray dust to seep through. The same dust that had followed me since Rome. I watched, paralyzed, as it spread across the floor, moving like fog. Whispers rose from beneath the floorboards, dozens of them, all speaking in unison now. He must seal it again. Blood for silence. It is never buried. I backed into the hallway, but the air thickened, pressing against me like invisible hands. The lights flickered once, twice. Then everything went black. When they came back on, I wasn't in my apartment. I was standing in the chamber again. The altar glistened in front of me, freshly wet. The statues had returned, but now they all looked familiar. Their stone faces were twisted in agony, and every one of them was someone I'd known. My friends, my family, the clerk from the university, all turned to stone. And at the center of the room on the altar lay the recorder. Its light blinked faintly. I picked it up with shaking hands. Play me. The whisper wasn't external, it came from inside my head. My thumb pressed the button before I could stop it. The recording began as static, then cleared to reveal one sound, the rhythmic beat of a heart. My heart. Then Lucius's voice. He opened the door. Now he must take my place. I felt it before I understood it, the pull beneath my skin like invisible roots dragging me down. My body stiffened. My breath caught. My vision dimmed as stone crept up my arms, cold and heavy. The last thing I saw was the altar pulsing faintly like it was breathing again. The last thing I heard was the whisper of thousands of voices joining into one. In tenebris non est oblivio. Then silence. Weeks later, the Italian government sealed access to a section of the Roman catacombs after reports of structural collapse. Official statements blamed flooding. Unofficially, several workers claimed they heard voices beneath the rubble. They said one voice in particular sounded like a man speaking modern Italian, repeating the same words over and over. Close the door. Close the door. But every time they tried to locate the source, the sound moved deeper into the earth. Some say the whispers are gone now. Others claim to hear them faintly through the stone, like breathing through walls. And those who listen long enough swear the whispers sometimes call them by name. If you ever visit Rome and find yourself near the old Appian Way, stop for a moment. Feel the ground beneath your feet. If it feels warm, if you hear something faint beneath the surface, walk away, because the whispers are still there, waiting, and they remember every voice that's ever answered them. In darkness, there is no forgetting. Even now, as I tell you this, part of me still wonders if it was all real. The whispers, the catacombs, Lucius, maybe they were fragments of a mind pushed too far, too deep into the dark. But then again, how do you explain the dust that keeps returning? How do you explain the faint heartbeat I still hear in the silence between words? Rome has always been called the Eternal City, a place where history refuses to die. Maybe that's truer than we realize. Maybe eternity isn't about monuments and memory. Maybe it's about voices that never stop speaking, waiting for someone foolish enough to listen. The catacombs were never meant to be disturbed. They were built to house the forgotten, to seal away not just the dead, but the things they carried: grief, guilt, unfinished prayers. And when the living wander too far below, sometimes those old wounds open again. Sometimes the past whispers back. If you think this is just a story, remember this. Whispers don't need distance to travel. They only need silence, and someone to hear them. So the next time you find yourself alone in the dark, when the air goes still and your breath fogs for no reason, listen carefully. Because maybe it isn't your imagination. Maybe something ancient has found a way through the cracks, reaching out, searching for the one who opened the door. And if you do hear it, that faint, almost human whisper calling your name, don't answer. Don't even breathe. Because once you do, you become part of the story.